Hello, I'm Daniel Hill from the Department of Philosophy here at the University of Liverpool, and I'm part of a research team here in the Department of Philosophy called the Entrapment team. This team is led by my colleague, Dr. Stephen MacLeod. I'm one of the co-investigators with my colleague, Professor Attila Tagni at the University of Milan, being the other co-investigator, and the fourth member of the team being our postdoctoral research associate, Dr. Tarek Usari, based here in the Department of Philosophy at Liverpool. The team is looking at three questions to do with entrapment. First, the question of definition. What is entrapment? We distinguish between state entrapment, when the agent that's doing the entrapping is from the state, so typically an undercover detective. An example of this might be when an undercover detective wants to entrap someone into selling illegal drugs, and they go down to a place where they know these people hang out in undercover gear, plain clothes and so on, and then they ask the person to sell them some drugs, and when they do, the target of the sting operation is surprised when the supposed buyer reveals themselves to be a police officer, and then they find themselves arrested. That's an example of state entrapment. We're also talking in the project about private entrapment. That's when the agent doing the entrapping is a private citizen rather than somebody employed by the state. So an example of this might be the so-called paedophile hunters. These are private citizens that suspect that somebody is a paedophile, and then online they impersonate an underage person, child, pretending to be a young girl or a young boy, and send messages trying to entice the person, the target in this case, to perform some illegal activity with the supposed child in some location. And when the person turns up, then they're surprised to find that they're confronted by the paedophile hunters, who then detain them until the police arrive. So that's an example of private entrapment. So we say that the definition of an entrapment is like this: an agent entraps a target when the agent solicits, procures by solicitation, an offence, a criminal offence, a crime from the target, and does so intending that the target should be prosecuted and convicted, or at least be threatened with prosecution and conviction for their crime. The second question at which we're looking in the project is the question of permissibility. That is the question: when, if ever, is entrapment of the kinds we've discussed morally permissible? And if it is ever morally permissible, is it still a bad thing on those occasions when it is permissible? For example, it might be that it's something that the law enforcement or private individuals maybe can do, but only as a last resort, that it's morally permissible then, but it's still a bad thing, something to be avoided if at all possible. And the third question at which we're looking is the question of implications. And what this means is, what are the implications for how the criminal justice system responds to an instance of entrapment? And what's interesting about this is that the answers vary quite a bit across the world. I'm told that in China, for example, there's no comeback at all if the police entrap somebody. The target who's been entrapped has got no right of redress or anything like that. In Australia, the rule is that evidence of the entrapment is excluded from the court case. So the court won't receive any evidence that the undercover officer has gained from the entrapment. In Britain, particularly in England and Wales, there's a stay of prosecution. And what that means is that if the court thinks that the target's been entrapped, they won't even be prepared to entertain a case against that target. They won't allow the prosecution to be heard in court. The case will be thrown out. By contrast, in the United States, entrapment forms a defense. And what this means is that the target who's been entrapped will put that defense in court, and the jury will take it into consideration. And if the jury finds that the target has been entrapped, then they will acquit the defendant, find the defendant not guilty. Those are the questions that we're looking at in the project. We're very grateful to have been sponsored by the Leverhulme Trust to do this. It's a 3-year project. We're coming towards the end now in the final year of the project, and we're thinking about what to do next.